Once you are all set up and you have your painting technique card, you are ready to start painting and learning about all the techniques that we are going to learn with timber painting. Make sure that you look through the slideshow. You can always refer back to that if you need to help you out at any point, where you can pause my video and go see some examples in there. I encourage you to talk with your table mates about what makes these paintings so cool as you look through. Some of them we may pull out as a mini lesson together as a class. These are the directions for setup and cleanup if you need to refer back to it. And again, I've put in a lot of different paintings just to kind of help give you some inspiration. Think about what might they have done to do that. The first thing you are going to need to do on your painting technique card is to label all of the boxes. So you're going to see that there are 8 boxes that we're going to do 8 different techniques, and that you want to label them so you know which one is the correct term. And so later on you can go back and think, maybe I would like to do that in my painting. So we are going to learn about glazing, flat color, layering textures, blending, dry brush, scumbling, pointillism, and on the last one, you're going to get a chance to really play around with some different non-traditional brush type items and create your own. So like I said, the slideshow will go along with you, and glazing is the first one that we're going to do. For this one, you must have 2 or more layers for your underpainting. Then what you're going to do is add some water to the timber paint, and think about what we did with glazing our ceramic sculptures, and you're going to be able to see the paint through. So to do this one, it's going to be where it takes place in 2 steps. We're going to paint the box and then come back to it after it has dried. So I'm actually going to exit my slideshow right now and go to my .cam so you are able to see me do these. So you can see that I have my name, just a last plug. Make sure you have that on there. And I didn't put hour since I want to use this from year to year. But I have already labeled all of my boxes as I want you to do. I'm going to set this to the side since I don't have as much space and I have to do some mixing. On this technique card, it really does not matter to me what colors you use. That's completely up to you. You could stick with a color scheme or like pick 2 or 3 colors if you wanted. All completely your choice. Sorry, I'm trying to get some brushes here too. So what I want to do is pull out just a few colors to start with so you can see how the glazing is different. I'm going to mix them, and I'll use some that are just straight. So you'll get an idea of how to mix with the paint palette. If we were on our final painting and you were doing a large area of your background, I would just put the paint straight onto the paint palette for you. But if it's just small areas, we waste a lot of paint by doing that. So make sure to use the ice cube tray in the smaller instances. And again, you're going to take and just swipe off as much of this paint as you can. If you need to, you can dip this into your water and then get all of it off well too. Once there are not any other colors coming off of it, it's good to go. So let's say I want to make this maybe like a maroon color. So I'm going to add a little bit of black to it. And you can see how quickly just a tiny little black can overpower a color, but that's okay because it's actually a maroon now. So I'm going to have that for one of my colors, and maybe I'll do a little bit of red just by itself. So I'm wiping off my paint mixer before I move on. So there is a little bit of switching back and forth sometimes that occurs. So hopefully you can see that area. I'm going to use one of my flat brushes, and I'm going to just get the tip of the brush wet. You want to try to keep your paint away from the metal part because that's where it gets really messy. It's hard to manage, and just keep it on the end. What I'm going to do is I'm going to fill with a little stripe and just pull down. I go back over. I'm going to make sure that I don't paint over my glazing word. You can switch your brush a different direction if you want, just to see the brush strokes, how those shift. And you can also see where I had more paint versus less. I'm going to wash off my brush. do go through a lot of paper towels very quickly. And make sure that there's none left. And when you squeeze out the water, just gently squeeze it. Don't pull, because that can pull out the actual bristles. And then I'm going to come and get some red paint. And I'll fill that in as well. So tempera is different than acrylic paint, which we use for our sketchbooks. It's a water-based paint like acrylic, but it's more forgiving to your clothes and other items because it will be easier to wash out. And it washes off of the paint palettes really well because it's not a plastic paint like that was with acrylic. So just kind of keep that in mind. If it overlaps and it mixes a little, that's okay. So basically for glazing right now, that's all that I'm going to do until it dries. I'm going to go on to the next box and do flat color. And to do that one, I'm going to take my pencil and just draw a little design out. So it doesn't have to be anything too special. You could make a zigzag, cut it in half, maybe make a circle, maybe outline that a little bit. You want to just have a few things so that you can test out using flat color. So I'll just do that. And I'm going to be using both my flat brushes and my round brushes. So when you are trying to do a flat color, one of the things that you have to do is totally mix your paint up ahead of time. This is where you need to mix up enough to cover the whole surface too, because when you come back at a later time, you never quite mix it exactly the same. So you might have to go over what you just did if it's not matching. So I already have this maroon, and I'm going to go ahead and mix it up a little bit more with my brush to get it more uniform. I'm going to paint that little half circle. Now, you're going to notice when you mix with your brush how it goes really close to the metal part. So if that happens to you, you can wipe it off on your paper towel, but you want to keep the paint towards the tip to get a really nice edge. I'm using my detail brush that's round because I want to make sure that I get a nice edge. So what I'm going to do is just pull it away from me, and I'm focusing on one side at a time. You can turn your paper if it makes it easier. And I basically just outline, making sure that I'm not pushing the brush. So sometimes you need to switch in order to get that detail just right. So I pull it that way, and then I'm going to come back down here, and you might not be able to see this very well because it was just off camera, but I'm coming back to get more paint to reload it. That's the other thing with flat color. You are trying to keep it uniform, even. You're wanting to fill the area and make it all look like the one same color. So you notice now this time I'm pulling it towards myself, and I started what was farther away from me and then moved closer. The other thing with flat color that you'll need to keep in mind is that you want to not paint an area that's right next to each other. So I did this area. I'm going to skip over to this one. So that way, when this dries, then I'm able to come back around. If I come in here while this is still wet, I'm going to actually be doing some blending because the two colors are going to touch and they're going to interact. They're going to go down my brush, and that's not flat color. Not that that's a bad thing. I love blending. It's just not what I'm trying to get for this technique. So now maybe I want to switch to a light blue. So again, I'm going to scoop out and paint on here. I know you can't see me get the white paint. That's okay. Just know that that's what I'm doing. And you too can pause and, mix up your paint while you're waiting on me. If you have a palette knife, I'll show you what that looks like. This one's a lot more flexible and a little easier to stir. So if you get a palette knife, great, but again, you don't have to have one. So I try to mix that all up ahead of time. Kind of scrape that off a little bit, and now I'm good to go. I'm going to come back with my brush that's washed off. Get that stirred up.